Have a very short, very short break, just to allow ourselves later on to cut into the recording at a proper time, so the bad jokes and the likes won't be visible then, and won't be audible. So let's make a very short break, like 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and then we will officially start. Awesome. Welcome to the webinar Development with VanillaStack. My name is Karsten Samaschke. I'm founder and CEO of Cloudical, and with me I have the awesome...
Hi everyone, thank you Karsten for having me today. So my name is Jurlind and I'm working at Cloudical as head of security and in charge of security topics within the company and also with our clients.
And it's great to have somebody who has security knowledge in this webinar, although it might have nothing to do with security, but that on the other hand might be a wrong perception. We will work that out. Before we dig deep into our conversation, Jurlind, and we will do that as a conversation, the both of us will talk, we will exchange some opinions. We had an upfront conversation to prepare this one. And when we had that conversation, we jointly worked out that VanillaStack for developers, or development with VanillaStack, is basically targeting 3 different audiences. And please allow me to shortly introduce those audiences, because we will touch on what VanillaStack and the tools integrated with VanillaStack will deliver to those audiences throughout this webinar. And before I start that, I also announced that we are going to have a small little announcement in the end. So if you happen to watch this, stay tuned. If you happen to watch the video recording, well, stay tuned as well. It would be worth it. So when we had our upfront conversations in preparation for that webinar, we basically worked out that we see again 3 different audiences working with VanillaStack. First of all, the traditional developers, then the developers working with containers but not working with Kubernetes, and thirdly, the cloud native developers. Jurlind, do you have a history in development? Do you have an understanding how development, perhaps the traditional development, is executed?
Yes, I have some experience in development while I was studying and also doing my PhD, but it was really, as you say, the traditional development where you have your own environment very specific to your needs. And the challenges that I always had during the time is that when I was changing places, going from, let's say, from one office, or I was, let's assume, in my PhD while I was even doing some empirical studies, I have always the challenge that I needed to replicate that environment. If I wanted to show some use case, if I wanted to take that system that I was developing and running some studies with that system, or if I wanted to exchange something, I wanted to do something dynamically for a showcase. That was always a challenge when I was working, when I was having my own experience as a developer. I wouldn't say myself I was let's say a pure software engineer, but I used to do coding due to very close systems. But I know the challenges coming from the traditional world and which I faced myself.
Mm-hmm. You basically touched on several points that I just want to emphasize upon. with the traditional development, basically what we did is we set up our own infrastructures. We set up our, say, virtual machines, but those were pretty much set up in a way that were, as you said, completely specific to our needs, which is actually a good and a great thing. Problem being with that approach is that it is hard to replicate. Frankly, we perhaps haven't even set up any virtual machine. We did development on our local machines, just for the sake of performance. I mean, what's wrong with that? Nothing is wrong with that. But if you then want to push your application towards, say, a development where you can test it, or towards towards an environment where you can test it, or towards an environment where you could possibly run it productively, you would run into a huge issue, right? With the problem being in that regard that you would have to set up everything again by hand. And that is, again, there's nothing wrong with that in that regard, because if you do that carefully, you could have a great environment. But typically,
but it would cost you a lot of time, right?
Yes, yes.
That was one of the challenges that I had always. So you need really to know what you're doing, and even if you know what you're doing, imagine even having a virtual machine. If you didn't have, let's say, a clean backup of that, a clone of the steps. So this is something that I used to do, like cloning each and every step in while setting up the system. Then you probably would need to do all the steps from the beginning. It might take you 1 day, 2 days, depending on how complex the system infrastructure you were working on, even on one local machine.
Exactly. And then, first of all, the time is a huge problem. And then we always joked about that, but it was a common saying. It ran on my machine. So we can't imagine what was wrong on the development environment or on the production environment. And that is a huge problem. That is a huge challenge. So just from that traditional perspective, a cloud environment, a cloud stack could bring a lot of benefits, right? Because with a cloud stack and a cloud environment, you would be able to roll out your virtual machines. You would be able to perhaps utilize some sort of an automated build environment, or could even run your Dockerized workloads. So the interesting thing is that with VanillaStack, you basically have all that in one small little package. Oh, well, it's not that small, but in one package. If I was a developer, I am a developer. Just for the protocol, I am a developer. I insist on it. But if I was a developer, and if I was looking for an environment which I could utilize for development, I would look for an environment which would allow me to roll out minimum virtual machines in a simple and easy way. And with VanillaStack, we have, Jurlind, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we actually have 2 approaches to that, right? To running virtual machines.
Yeah, so we have Azure, if I'm not mistaken, right, or OpenStack. Both of them
yeah.
would allow you to spin up virtual machines.
Exactly.
Fairly automated. And
exactly.
You also had a point in here while you were saying that, I was thinking about, thinking back when I was doing some development, and that was on, as you said, on local environments, is exactly coming from a security perspective. It was always a challenge because you needed to go through all these configurations. So if you wanted to show something also from a security perspective, you needed to put all this configuration in place. So you can imagine what a burden that is. And especially one of the other things that you mentioned that comes to my mind is what you said, that it runs, you can run it. So it runs on my machine. Why it's not running on the production environment or on the testing environment? And when I think back of when I started studying, so one of the things while Java was such a hype, it was because it was platform independent, and you could run your applications on the Java virtual machine, which will compile your bytecode, and it runs on each and every machine. That abstraction layer, and that was one of the strengths. And there's what I see most of the strength when we talk about VanillaStack, that it provides you that abstraction layer that you don't need to think what's below them, or to take care in a sense of manually doing that.
Well, I could not I could not agree more. Although I just had some backfiring of the loudspeakers, but I could not agree more on that. But frankly, Java runs perfectly well on VanillaStack, right? You could again spin up, as you said, using OpenStack, for example, a virtual machine, or if you don't want to run OpenStack because that is like the big boy in the room, the big elephant in the room. If you want to just do some virtualization, you could use, as you said, KubeVirt, which is part of our distribution. And the point is, in that regard, that with KubeVirt, it is as simple as writing a short YAML file to provision and to roll out a virtual machine. Yes, if you don't like YAML, if you don't like working with a command line, yeah, okay, get it. But on the other end, as of now, we are at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. Frankly, the typical developer, even if being in a traditional ecosystem, is used to work with the command line. Frankly, I don't like working with the command line all the time. It's not my kind of beer. But using the command line in a useful way, using it to automate and to say start or stop my virtual machines on my server, on my VanillaStack cluster, well, couldn't care less, because that's just one or two statements I have to type, and it's basically one configuration I have to write. It can actually be checked into my source code system. But what if that would still be too much for me? Is there something that we could offer with VanillaStack to the customers, to the developers of this world? Or if you could wish for something, perhaps I can help you with that wish.
Yeah, maybe you can help me a little bit.
What if I told you that there was something completely automated for you? What if I told you that there was something that would just grab your source code as you check it in, catch it, build it, and deploy it without you having to set up a build pipeline, without you having to set up a, deployment pipeline, just by a snap of a finger? How would that sound to you, Jurlind?
Well, on the first place, again, putting my security glasses, even I don't have glasses so far, that would be great. Why? Because it follows the principle of one of the main principles of security, that we are talking here about developers, and we know developers' primary goal is to develop and to get their application running, to extend the functionality of the application they are working on. It's not, for example, thinking about all of the other stuff around it, be those some privacy configurations or some security configurations. So, and if I have this with one click and I don't need to think about of these things, then, well, this is the dream world, right?
It is. And as you said, from a security's perspective, for example, that would be an awesome thing, because with such an automated tool, you would basically circumvent most of the issues you have, because most of the security issues are arising from complexity, are arising from not knowing enough about a platform or whatever. The thing is, let me put it that way, that is there. That solution, that magical solution, that would be able to roll out your product, your build into a development environment and later on into a production grade environment is there with VanillaStack. You know what it's called? It's Cloud Foundry. Yeah, and that is actually the reason why we integrated Cloud Foundry into the platform straight away and right from the beginning. Because to us, that kind of magic is nothing that we want to miss, because it has to be there. Even if perhaps a more advanced developer, but pardon me, that's actually the wrong word to say, because it's not about being more advanced. It's more perhaps about having more control. That might be the difference there. Somebody wanting to have more control would perhaps go the more, the more manually controlled route by rolling out a virtual machine and then deploying the artifacts. But the interesting thing is, you spoke of Java, for example. I spoke of .NET, and many other programming languages are supported out of the box. And whatever you set up there, it just runs. Cloud Foundry, when being integrated the way we did it, is basically a platform that just takes the code, does the automated build and provisions it on the Kubernetes cluster. You can even scale things up and down by rules. There's a lot of functionality within Cloud Foundry, and it's just there because it's awesome. It's an awesome open source project. So having said that, well, for the traditional developer, actually VanillaStack sounds like a dream. And I give you one hint. We've tried to set up Cloud Foundry on different platforms, on many cloud platforms. Let's not call them by name. Let's just call them A and G and O and T and perhaps another A. Do your research alone. Whenever you try to set it up on their platforms using their managed Kubernetes, you will most definitely run into issues. We tried it, really. I was talking to Jeff, one of our great employees this morning, and he was telling me about his experience when running it out, when we're trying to set it up on the, I don't say the name, on the cloud of the company that is basically responsible for creating Java. So the point is, it did not work out because with the managed Kubernetes running there, you are, how do I put it? You are basically running into an ecosystem where you are limited. It's perhaps not the proper configuration of storage. It's perhaps not the proper networking configuration. It's perhaps even a policy preventing you from rolling out those things because they want you to use their solutions. With VanillaStack, as a developer, I would be free as a bird, because I could basically rely on the vanilla platform, on the Kubernetes, not on a Kubern or Kubernetes or Ubernet, something where things have been cut off. And using that platform, which actually just requires you to provision 4 to 6 virtual machines on pretty much any cloud platform, which requires you to have a free IP address and a wildcard DNS entry, you could basically run whatever you want to do in a totally controlled and automated way. And I feel like that is awesome. That is truly awesome. And even your security perspective, I feel like, would agree with that, because being in control as a developer is actually one of the most important things, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. If the thing that while you were explaining this, and I think it makes a lot of sense, saying that you have the freedom, so you don't get this, let's say, the vendor lock-in. But I was mainly thinking about the things around open source. So you have the complete source. You can pick and choose what components you want to work together. This is the great thing about VanillaStack, that it provides you an ecosystem which is totally open source. So you can build that kind of infrastructure to your needs. You can tailor it to your needs, and you can extend it as you want, as you go. You can shrink it.
But Jurlind, isn't that complex?
Yes, so this is the question you read my mind. That was going to be one of my questions towards you. Like, what would be, like, you have been developing for a long time. Yeah, so you are the expert developer. So what would be, let's say,
You can't see that.
you having all the, no, you can't see that, of course. But actually all this experience, so you have gone and you have done all these steps, and you have followed all this development, all this new modern, going from the traditional to the modern. So you have kept pace, so you have learned with every day. So something that not everyone is able to do, and not everyone maybe has the chance to do. So would you see there what would be the challenges? So that was kind of my rhetorical question to your question now. Are there really challenges for someone, right?
Let me totally understand the question. So let me give you, and you wouldn't expect it differently, won't you? Let me give you a ton of answers. First of all, let me start by saying, when I tried to set up my first Kubernetes cluster ever, like 4 or 5 years ago, I miserably failed. It literally took me months to have a cluster up and running. And if I would have let you look at it, let me put it that way, you wouldn't talk to me today. Because that was, from my perspective, the most insecure thing I ever did. Because I just, rolled it out with, say, most open permissions, because, well, what is a token? What should I do with that? Do I need that? Yeah, please, let's activate that. It's always a good thing. I failed miserably, and I did it the completely wrong way. With VanillaStack, installer, let me put it that way. All I need to know about is how to utilize a browser. I need to know about the IP addresses of my machines. I need to know about the host name, which I'm going to use. And that is pretty much it. It literally takes between 30 minutes to a little bit more than an hour, basically depending on the speed of your platform, until you have rolled it out. And it is rolled out in a way that is actually either a perfectly capable developers cluster or a production grade cluster. And you can easily add additional things, either using our tools or using Helm, for example, or using Kubernetes deployment tools. The point being is that kind of complexity, and that the complexity is still there. It actually even it has actually even grown more over time. Specifically, if you then would like to set up something like storage, or set up I don't know, like Prometheus Grafana or the F-stack for monitoring your workloads, for looking at your workloads, perhaps even Jaeger for tracing things. If you wanted to set up those things, it would take you another couple of hours minimum to do that. I tried that by hand as a developer, as an unexperienced developer, not by age, because I'm old. But the point is, with the technology unexperienced developer, no. And with VanillaStack, and that is something which we insisted upon when doing it, when creating it, and we still insist upon it when we continue working on it. With VanillaStack, you basically have a very simple way of rolling out things, either by using the installer or by using our Ansible scripts. And you would end up having a platform that is set up in a way that even you, Jurlind, as a security focused guy, would say, okay, yeah, I could imagine using it for a while. Even if I would bring in perhaps more tools for security, and by the way, we are working on that. So the point is that kind of excuse for heading over to a cloud offering and using that, although I know, or I would know, it is limited. It is not a real thing. It is perhaps even castrated. That kind of excuse is not there anymore. I can run my cluster and I can set them up on my infrastructure or on cloud infrastructure. And doing that, I could, even as a traditional developer, utilize the best of both platforms. And by the way, VanillaStack is your VM flat rate. Because with VanillaStack, even on public cloud platforms, you wouldn't pay more for another virtual machine. You just pay the price for the cluster on the public cloud environment, and off you go, and that's it. If you want to roll out some 10 more virtual machines, well, do so. If you just shut them down instead of terminating them, well, do so as well. No worries. It won't cost you anything more. So one of the biggest issues with hyperscalers and public cloud environments, the issue of not knowing what I'm going to pay for, is practically eliminated with VanillaStack. So those are all aspects which would lead me as a developer to saying, okay, yeah, I tried it out. Even if I would be a little bit traditional in my approach. And that gives me an elegant way of jumping over to those kind of developers, the next level, so to say, the container developers, because for them, VanillaStack, first of all of the things we just said are still true there. Easy to use platform. You can use either virtual machines or Cloud Foundry, or you could use your Docker containers with a little bit of Kubernetes magic. But if you just want to roll them out and want to run them, you could actually still use virtual machines and run them inside them. No worries on that. But for those developers, for those container developers, we basically solve a different problem with VanillaStack, don't we? Because Jurlind, did you read the press announcements like 4 to 6 weeks ago when Docker Inc., the maintainers of Docker Hub, announced that they are going to charge for usage, that they are going to impose limitations and limits on usage? Did you read about that?
Yes, but this is no wonder. So this is how things kind of develop and evolve.
Absolutely. And frankly, from a commercial perspective, I can totally understand that, because it's expensive as hell. Pardon me my words, but it is expensive as hell to run such a huge platform. And Docker Hub is a huge platform. It costs a lot of money. So quite frankly, I can totally understand Mirantis, the owner of Docker Inc. now, that they want to go and impose some rate limitations and so on and so forth, just to monetize their platform. But I am not Mirantis. You are not Mirantis. We are not Mirantis. We are Cloudical. Exactly. And as Cloudical, we have an answer to that, right? Because with VanillaStack, and you will touch on that from a security standpoint in a few seconds, I'm pretty sure. With VanillaStack, we allow you to roll out your own Docker registry. So you won't be trapped in some rate limitation trap. You would just roll it out, make it available, and then use it. You can upload your Docker images to your own Docker registry. We have some tools integrated with Harbor to make life more secure, and Jurlind, you will touch on that in a few seconds. As a matter of fact, actually, we do utilize our own cluster with our own Docker registry, with our own Harbor, just to allow our customers to download VanillaStack and all the components. So we do the dog feeding there. No, not the dog feeding, the dog fooding. We eat our own dog food there. And perhaps we feed dogs because, if they are hungry, they deserve something to eat. No, but the point is, that is basically, let me put it that way, just from a developer's perspective. That is great because I don't need to create an account with Docker Hub. I don't need to pay for things. I can rest assured that all my images are my images. They are not shared with somebody else. They are not downloadable by somebody else if I would like to ensure that. So I have that in place. And then the security guy sitting right to me. Or is it left? Anyways, the security guy, I feel like the security guy is happy with that decision, right?
Yes, this is something that in the development of Docker as a platform or as containers coming or enabling the use of containers at scale, and then seeing the advantages of containers with respect to performance and also with respect to security. If you think about how security has been done in the traditional way, where you would have one server running couple of different applications that have nothing to do with each other and have different security requirements or levels. So using containers where you have maybe not a very strong isolation as you would have on virtual machines, but you can achieve that kind of similar isolation if you take measurements and if you do configure things correctly. To some instance, you still have, let's say, an advantage to security compared to the traditional way. While Docker was enabling this, of course, well, as there are positive people out there, as we at Cloudical, there are also negative people out there that would try to exploit that. And what people did, they put images prepared with backdoors or malware in them.
Oh, I read about that. Wasn't it, according to studies, like up to 60% of the free, not validated, free images on Docker Hub have been compromised? Wasn't it something along those kind of numbers?
So it can be even higher. Why? Because these things are kind of static. And the idea of containerization of your application is that you don't need now to think about your operating system below, but you take that container and you run it on your machine, meaning like you would install. Back then, in the traditional way, you would need to ask your administrator for every kind of change in the configuration or an application you wanted to install, and so on and so forth. So that was like some very hard coded processes in the companies. Now things are becoming more, let's say, kind of dynamic. So we are entering rather a dynamic and automated way of these processes. So the automation and these technologies are allowing this for us, and they also reduce errors that can happen from a human perspective. Because back then, an administrator needed to look at the report of the scanning of that and going each and own application and so on and so forth. And why it happens with Docker? Well, some normal or some good guys there would know the use case that so many people want, so that you can replicate it very, very easy. and they would put it out there, and many people would use it. So let's assume these people have a good intention, but people that have bad intentions would just use that, and they know by looking at the numbers how many people are downloading that application. And that becomes again interesting for those people that have bad intentions, because then they would try to either replace that with a newer version, or they would even get attack that and upload it into a registry where you don't have. So this is something public, so it's not under your control.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I feel like that is the biggest
and
problem
it
with
was in
that.
the beginning. It was in the beginning of the
Yeah.
history even worse. And now having your own registry, like with Harbor, as we have integrated, as you just said, you have control of what images are in your registry, meaning that you know what your developers or you as a developer are going to be used on, what
Yeah.
images running on each of the machines on your node. You have done some vulnerability scans on those images, knowing that at least they don't have well-known and very high-risk vulnerabilities existing, and you do maybe some risk analysis because some risk is still out there. Maybe you are using even other technology that we have integrated in VanillaStack that it will even prevent you zero-day attacks.
Ah, you are referring to the awesome guys of Polyverse
Yes,
and their
exactly.
polymorphing technology, which is, by the way,
Exactly.
truly awesome.
Exactly. So if you would combine that, then you would have even these advantages when using VanillaStack. So you would prevent even zero-day attacks on that. And in addition to that, as you just put it, you'd have a lot of advantages from a
But
security perspective.
Jurlind, do I need to be an expert on that to roll it out and make it available? Because frankly, what you just said is exhausting. If I would, if not the way you said it, don't get me wrong, but if I would be forced if you would tell me you need to do that, you need to secure your harbor, you need to roll out, for example, Polyverse, you need to integrate harbor with Claire or whatever. Frankly, I would be totally lost. Um,
Yes, so that is the feeling you have if you just listen to the terms, and they maybe sound to you a lot of words, a lot of things together. But this is one of the let's say kind of I would say characteristic they would like in Cloudical to push out there, and the mindset. So we see security. Also, we know that usability is a very important part for security. So and with VanillaStack, even myself, not going through the experience that you had with setting up the cluster. So I was one of the lucky guys that would use VanillaStack just by those clicks, and even not bothering of the, let's say, the how I can set up the cluster, but it's out there, and then I can focus on my work, seeing what components are there, how they are interfaced, looking at from the security perspective, just focusing on my main task. And even with Polyverse, it's just by one click. So you just say, I'd like to install that technology and I want to have that feature. So this is it. So just by one click, you would improve the security of your cluster significantly. So, and yeah, so that is something as holding a usable security, a PhD on usable security. It's very important to follow that path
yeah,
because
yeah.
during the PhD, I also had a lot of learning a lot of stuff, especially from a psychology perspective, and also looking from to security, also from a human perspective. We have PGP. PGP has been around there, and has the promises of having a secure web encrypted and authenticated started 30 years ago. And well, still today, you would have a lot of companies not encrypting their emails if they use their own email servers, and if they use, because this is hard to implement, is hard to get it running, and it's hard for users to use it. They don't understand the concept maybe behind, and there is no way to make them tangible. So This is where we do something different at Cloudical, yeah, and with VanillaStack.
Yeah, basically with both, right? The company and the product.
Yeah.
Just touching back a little bit towards developers, towards the container developers. Again, what I feel like is very important is you cannot overemphasize the fact that you have your own registry with some great integrated tools under your control. That is something, you said it, it's a matter of control. It's a matter of being able to know what's going on. And if I then, for example, look at, for example, Amazon's announcement, like 2-3 weeks ago, when they announced that they now give their customers the chance and the opportunity to roll out their own container registry on Amazon's platform. How do I put that? It just made me laugh. Because again, what they offer you is to have you have your individual container registry, but you have to pay extra for that, first of all. And secondly, it's a shared platform. What could possibly go wrong? The point is, and the point being, is that from a container developer's perspective, should not cost you extra. It should just be there, and you should not need to pay for the number of images you host. You should not need to pay for I don't know, the number of images you download within half an hour. It should be yours. And frankly, as a developer, I, for example, in the Java environment, we have something like Maven or Gradle or something like that. Those package managers. And one of the best practices in regards to maintenance and security was and has always been the approach of hosting your own Maven repository in that regard. Because that made you independent of what others did. You had to download the base, in that regard, packages, but with VanillaStack, the base images. And then in going from there, you would be able to just use it. And even if somebody takes down the central repositories, you would just sit there and say, okay, good, no worries, I have my own repository. And that is, from my perspective, very, very, very important. That kind of independence, that kind of control, that kind of not being metered for the usage is very, very important. Okay, so having spoken of container developers, the third audience that we basically identified is cloud native developers. And before I give you, Jurlind, another chance to basically tell them about security, and if I say that, don't get me wrong, I love it. I truly love it. Because to all the complex things you say, we have a great answer with VanillaStack, thanks to your work. For cloud native developers, VanillaStack should be the go-to distribution, to be honest, because our platform is the original Kubernetes. It is not like a, I don't know, customized version of Kubernetes. Not a, don't know, vendor-locked version of Kubernetes. It is the Kubernetes, because that's where the name comes from. We use vanilla Kubernetes, not Red Hat or SUSE or Canonical Kubernetes. All of them are great products, but they are tied to one platform and they are heavily customized. And I definitely ask you, Jurlind, to touch on that in a few seconds, that kind of customization and the issues with that. But the point is, if you want to run containerized workloads, here is your platform. And your platform is already ready for production because it includes storage. It includes Prometheus and Grafana for monitoring the platform. it includes basically everything you need to run things, to make things work, and to ensure that damn it, the network is playing games with me at the moment. It basically ensures that the platform ensures that you are just good to go whenever you feel like it is required. So as a cloud native developer, I can't think of a better alternative, because again, we are running vanilla Kubernetes, and you can run it on each of the major cloud platforms, and you can run it on bare metal, and you can run it on virtual machines. It's always the same platform, not locking you in. So again, it's Kubernetes, not Ubernetes, not Kubern, not Edis. It is the Kubernetes you have with our platform. What does that make, Jurlind, from a security perspective?
Well, it gives you, let's say, also the freedom of extending that cluster to your needs, tailoring that to your needs, meaning that, well, security is always a trade-off, in a sense that you would think about the context you are running, what application you are going to have within your cluster. And what I see as an advantage is, with that, from a security perspective, is you going with the principle of having different environments, and also not paying more, because imagine you would have this in the public clouds, and having, for example, a testing, a staging, a development, and a production environment, while you pay only for those machines. But what gives you that from a security perspective? It gives you that you can replicate those environments, make them similar, which is one of the big challenges when it comes to, well, as you said before, it ran on my machine. So, but now, even as a cloud native,
you can have it with Kubernetes as well. It ran on my development cluster. Why isn't it running on my production cluster? Yeah, well, different cloud, different platform. It's not the same.
Exactly. So this is what I see one advantage of, from a security perspective. And of course, with the names and the companies that you named, of course, they do a lot of work also with respect to the security. I mean, they have their own very great and brave experts to all of this, in all of the dimensions of the topic that we are touching. No doubt about that. The only thing is that they are focusing on their own kind of tools and their own world, and you need to adapt towards them. While with VanillaStack, we are providing you a kind of ecosystem. We mentioned polyvores, for example, but imagine you are a developing company, so you want a CI/CD pipeline on your production environment and your develop environment. You can introduce other tools, like especially when you do software development, which is what we're talking about. You can implement, and we will have this in the roadmap to integrate those tools, like, for example, statical code analysis tools that you can implement. We can implement for dynamical code analysis, or even tools that look at the machine code and try to identify any problems into that like binary analysis platform, or Ghidra, which well, it's a tool coming from NSA, developed. So most of the people would be a little bit skeptical, but it's good to play around with this tool to understand and
aren't they using the tool themselves as well? So when they are using it, it should not be that bad, actually.
Sure. So if they are developing and they're putting their expertise, it's probably a good thing to look at and to understand where it can fit into my environment. So I'm not saying go and use that and this, but this is what VanillaStack it provides you, that you can extend it and put the tools and even have these environments distributed and follow this principle of doing segmentation, doing segregation, and having the advantage of doing this by one click from one platform in a hybrid kind of cloud environment system, in a private cloud environment system, in a community environment, which I'm thinking about, for example, in universities where they do research, meaning they need to share platforms. So this would give them a great advantage because the platform would be available to this community, and it would look the same, and it would have the same policies with respect to security. So it will need to fulfill all the similar policies, while with going from one environment to the other, because the one is giving me this feature and the other one is giving me the other feature, which what is usually out there. And then combining them because you need a specific use case. Well, with VanillaStack, you can just have that in one place because it gives you the freedom of putting those open source tools and even commercial tools you can add there that you would need, but at least you have one platform that you can replicate everywhere.
And yeah, I feel that it is not only important from a security perspective, that's also important from a trustworthiness perspective, perhaps even from a privacy perspective. From a data ownership perspective, many perspectives that we should care about as developers, we should care about as operational teams that basically support what you just said. I couldn't agree more on that, and I just want to point out again and make it very simple and easy, just paraphrasing what you just said. If you want to have the original Kubernetes, if you want to have the openness of the platform in a positive way, if you want to integrate things in a way that it makes sense, if you not want to rely on what others did to you in a way that you not even can look into that, like with the managed Kubernetes offerings on the other clouds, well, you should consider our platform. And there's one problem I have with, for example, the commercial Kubernetes out there. And I totally agree with you, Jurlind, on the fact that those guys do an awesome job of integrating security aspects into the platform. But from time to time, I have the feeling that they are working on security issues they actually introduced themselves. When they went to the path that they basically chose to have a platform that is tied to their ecosystem, integrated into only their products. They did not widen up things. Instead, they narrowed down things. So if you have an issue, that issue is tied to your platform. It's not visible by the whole community. It's not visible by those hundreds of thousands or perhaps even millions that work on Kubernetes, actively develop Kubernetes each year. And that is something, frankly, from a security perspective, from a trustworthiness perspective, from a no vendor lock perspective, it would trouble me, because what I would like to roll out, I always liked to roll out the original thing, not the customized version. Could be that the customized version has advantages, but frankly, I would argue that it would just be relevant for like 5% of the people out there, because it's the same thing as I've seen with back then with Java EE application service. You have that standard, you have the platform. In that case, it was Java EE, and basically every single Java EE application server was certified against that platform. So you could basically rest assured, whenever and as long as you stick to what the standard defined, you would be able to switch the platform to your liking. You would be able to just utilize everything to your liking. And then you had your commercial offerings. Don't get me wrong, VanillaStack is a commercial offering as well. But those commercial offerings that try to lock you into their ecosystem, just to get you into there and to milk you and to just make you a paying customer and keeping you as a paying customer. What they did is they introduced awesome tools but those tools were specifically tied to that platform, like, for example, authentication tools, like, for example, perhaps even something like CI/CD pipelines. And you see the same thing today, exactly the same thing, by the way, even from the same companies, like IBM back then. With the point being that those platforms might look awesome because you have everything, but they are not, because they lock you in. They keep you in their ecosystem, and that is a huge issue in regards to diversity, in regards to choice, in regards to no vendor locking, and in regards to security. And that is always forgotten about when you look at happy people with smiling computers on their advertisements. That's not the real thing. It's not the platform. It is some customized thing with a lot of trade-offs that is sold by emotion and not by rationality, by security, and by ultimately having a spirit of freedom. That is my understanding of that. And yes, I take that personal. Because as a developer, I always tried to stick with the standards. I always tried to do that, because although things might go faster initially when just using a library from some vendor that is proprietary, I ultimately get locked in. And that is a feeling that I don't like. I just wanted to say that. So, Jurlind, we have a small, I mean, it's the time of the year, right? We figured, the two of us, and I know that we had long and lengthy discussions about it. You said we have to do that, and I said no, not gonna happen. But it happened. Yeah, you have been the winner. So we have a Christmas special with VanillaStack because we feel like you, Jurlind, feel like everybody should be able to participate in that greatness. So there is the VanillaStack Christmas special. You get 60 days of VanillaStack flat support for the commercial VanillaStack in the silver SLA, and installation support. And Jurlind, do you remember our discussion? I said, well, let's charge them billions of euros. What did you say? What did you say? What did you insist upon? Do you remember? Oh, I remember. You said it should be free. And Jurlind, truly, if that's the way you want to spread security, we should have a discussion. So the point I made is it's only valid until end of January, and it's only available at vanillastack.io, and you can happily talk about that using the hashtag VanillaStack. And if you mention Jurlind and if you say thanks to him, it will reach the right person. Jurlind, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for bringing in those very, very valuable insights and those very, very valuable kind of informations and approaches. It was a pleasure talking to you, as always. And by the way, a small insider, Jurlind has been on vacation, and I'm so happy he's back. Thank you, Jurlind.
That's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
It was my pleasure. And we hope you learned something. If not, just watch it again. And if you did, reach out to us. Don't forget about our Christmas special and enjoy the upcoming days. See you later. Bye.